Nobody touches that Omega. Alpha King Callan Whitmore's voice cut across the courtyard just as Evelyn Mercer hit the fountain. 1 second. Evie had been balancing a tray of white roses beside Silverpine's royal monument. The next, her heel caught on a lighting cable. The tray flipped, and she plunged backward into 3 feet of freezing water in front of half the pack. Laughter broke out near the council steps. Of course it was her, someone muttered. Evie surfaced, soaked, humiliated, and choking on cold air. She pushed wet hair from her face and saw every important alpha in the northwest staring down at her. The fountain was restricted during founding night. Omegas without rank were not even supposed to cross the gold line around it. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to stand. "I'll clean everything up." Then the stone beneath her feet began to glow. Pale blue symbols spread across the bottom of the fountain, one after another, like something ancient had just awakened. The laughter stopped. A sharp cry came from the far side of the courtyard. Rowan and Maisie, the Alpha King's wolf pups, broke free from their guards. Rowan shifted first, landing on 4 paws before racing through the crowd. Maisie followed, smaller and faster, her silver-gray coat flashing beneath the lights. "Stop them," a royal guard shouted. Nobody could. The pups leaped into the fountain and rushed straight to Evie. Rowan pressed himself against her side, trembling so hard the water rippled around him. Maisie climbed into Evie's arms and buried her face beneath Evie's chin. Evie froze. These were the same pups who had bitten through training gloves, shattered medical scanners, and refused every healer in Silverpine. Yet now Rowan's breathing slowed beneath her hand. Maisie went completely still. "It's okay," Evie whispered, though she had no idea whether she was speaking to them or herself. "You're safe." A powerful scent rolled through the courtyard, cedar, rain, and something darker. Callan Whitmore crossed the gold line without slowing. The Alpha King did not call for a servant. He did not wait for a guard. He stepped into the fountain in his black suit and polished shoes, water rising to his knees. "Give me the child," he said. Evie looked down at Maisie. The little wolf tightened her paws around Evie's shoulders. "She doesn't want me to." Silence fell over the courtyard. No one spoke to the Alpha King that way. Callan's gray eyes locked on Evie's face. For one dangerous second, his wolf pushed against the surface. Not in anger. Something else. Something that made the air feel too small. Then his gaze dropped to Evie's wrist. A mark had appeared beneath her skin, glowing with the same blue light as the fountain. Callan's expression changed. "Where did you get that?" "Get what?" Evie asked. Maisie lifted her head and touched her nose to the mark. Somewhere beneath Callan's shirt, an old scar over his heart burned for the first time in years. He turned toward the guards. "Take her inside." Evie's stomach dropped. "Am I under arrest?" Callan looked at the pups clinging to her, then back at the impossible symbol on her wrist. "No," he said quietly. "You may be the reason they're still alive." Evie expected a cell. Instead, the royal guards led her through a glass hallway overlooking the dark pines and into Silverpine's private medical wing. Everything smelled like cedar cleaner and expensive coffee. She stood dripping on a white tile floor while 3 healers stared at her as if she had brought a live grenade into the building. Rowan and Maisie still refused to leave her side. Rowan paced in a tight circle around her legs, his dark fur wet and bristling. Maisie remained pressed against Evie's hip, watching every adult in the room with wide amber eyes. "Please sit down," one healer said. Evie looked at the spotless examination table. "I am going to ruin that." "Sit," Callan said from the doorway. His voice was calm, but the entire room obeyed before Evie did. She lowered herself onto the table, water pooling beneath her shoes. Callan had changed out of his soaked jacket, but his black shirt was still damp at the shoulders. He looked less like a king now and more like a man who had run through a storm without stopping to think. Serena Vale entered behind him carrying a tablet. Her silver badge marked her as the royal bondkeeper. "Separate the pups from her," Serena said. Rowan growled. Maisie grabbed Evie's sleeve. "That may not be a good idea," Evie said. Serena gave her a thin smile. "You are in no position to decide what is good for them." The words landed harder than Evie expected. She had heard versions of them her entire life. Stay useful. Stay quiet. Do not confuse kindness with importance. Callan's gaze shifted to Serena. "Let them remain." "Your Majesty, we do not know what she did." "I fell into a fountain," Evie said. "That was the full plan." One of the younger healers nearly smiled, then quickly looked down. Serena did not. The fountain reacted to you. The royal heirs reacted to you. Those things do not happen because someone is clumsy. Evie looked at the pale mark on her wrist. It had faded, but not disappeared. Then I would also like an explanation. Callan stepped closer. His scent reached her again, cedar and rain, carrying a strange pull that made her pulse stumble. He noticed. His expression tightened, and he moved back half a step. What pack were you born into? He asked. Red Creek. Family name. Mercer. Serena's fingers paused over the tablet. Only for a second. Evie still caught it. My parents died when I was 11, she continued. I was raised in a community home outside Spokane. I transferred to Silver Pines 6 months ago for work. No bonded relatives? Callan asked. None that wanted to claim me. The room went quiet. Evie regretted saying it the moment the words left her mouth. She hated pity almost as much as humiliation. Callan did not look away. Did you know the pups were ill? Serena asked. I knew people whispered about them. And yet you approached them. They approached me. Rowan stopped pacing and leaned against Evie's knee as if proving her point. Callan watched the pup settle. Something in his face softened, then disappeared behind royal control. What did you say to them in the fountain? That they were safe. That is all. Sometimes that is not a small thing. Serena closed the tablet. She should be held for scent manipulation testing. Evie's stomach tightened. Held where? In a secure room. Maisie made a frightened sound. Callan's wolf flashed in his eyes. No, the single word silenced everyone. He looked at Evie, then at the children clinging to her. She remains here under my protection until we understand what happened. Evie lifted her chin. Protection and detention can look very similar from the inside. For the first time, surprise crossed his face. Before he could answer, scratching came from the hallway. A guard opened the door. 2 more royal wolf pups sat outside, both staring directly at Evie. One lowered its head. The other whined softly. Serena went pale. Callan turned toward her. You said only Rowan and Maisie were affected. Serena did not answer. Evie looked down as the mark on her wrist began to glow again. The 2 younger pups did not move when the guard tried to guide them away. One was a sandy-colored boy named Theo. The other, a small girl called June, kept her ears flattened and her eyes fixed on Evie's glowing wrist. How many pups are being treated in this wing? Callan asked. 4, the senior healer replied. All from different families. Serena stepped between Evie and the doorway. This proves nothing. They may be responding to the same scent trigger. Then why are you afraid? Evie asked. Serena's face hardened. I am not afraid of you. You looked afraid before you even knew my name. Callan glanced at Serena, but Rowan suddenly gave a sharp bark. His body began to shake beside Evie's knee. The medical scanner near the wall started beeping as his heart rate climbed. He needs his medication, a healer said, reaching for a syringe. Rowan snapped at the air and backed into the corner. Maisie followed him, whining. Theo and June pressed closer to the door. Everyone stopped moving, Evie said. Nobody listened. The healer took another step. Rowan's growl deepened. Stop, Callan ordered. The room froze. Evie slid off the examination table and crouched several feet from Rowan. Cold water still clung to her dress, and her knees shook from more than the temperature, but she kept her voice steady. I am not coming closer, she told him. You can come to me when you are ready. Serena crossed her arms. He cannot understand you in this state. Rowan's eyes shifted toward Evie. He understands enough, she said. She sat on the floor and placed both hands in her lap. When I was little, there was a wolf who hated thunderstorms. Everyone thought he was angry, but he was not. He was scared, and nobody wanted to admit a wolf could be scared. Rowan's growl weakened. Evie continued. So he hid under a porch and pretended he was guarding the house. Very brave. Very convincing. Maisie took one careful step toward her. The problem was, he picked the porch with a family of raccoons underneath it. One of the healers covered a laugh. Even Callan's mouth shifted slightly. Rowan's ears lifted. That wolf learned 2 things, Evie said. First, raccoons do not respect personal space. Second, being scared does not make you weak. Rowan moved forward. 1 step, then another. Evie did not reach for him. She let him decide. At last, he rested his head against her shoulder. His trembling slowed almost immediately. Maisie curled against Evie's side, and the other 2 pups crossed the room to settle near her feet. The monitor fell quiet. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Callan watched Evie with an expression she could not read. There was relief in it, but also something heavier. Guilt, perhaps. How long has this been happening? She asked. The shaking, the fear. Callan looked toward Rowan. Since their mother died. Evie's hand paused on the pup's back. Your sister? He nodded once. They have not slept through the night in 9 months. The words sounded less like a royal report and more like a confession. Evie looked around the spotless room, at the machines, the medicine, and the adults who had tried everything except sitting still. Maybe they do not need to be fixed, she said. Maybe they need to feel safe long enough to heal. Serena's voice cut through the moment. Or maybe she is causing the calm herself. Callan turned slowly. Leave. Serena stared at him. Your Majesty. You heard me. She walked out without another word. But the look she gave Evie promised the matter was not over. Callan remained near the door. They should rest, he said. They will not leave her, the healer replied. Evie looked down at 4 sleeping pups gathered around her. Then I guess I am staying for a while. Callan stepped into the hallway. But before he disappeared, he pressed one hand against his chest. Beneath his shirt, the scar over his heart had begun to glow with the same pale blue light as Evie's wrist. By sunrise, Evie had 4 wolf pups asleep around her and a royal order waiting on Callan's desk. He stood in his glass-walled office overlooking the rain-soaked pines, while Serena's replacement healer explained that Rowan and Maisie had slept for nearly 5 hours without medication. Theo and June had returned to their families, but only after Evie promised they could visit again. Move Miss Mercer into the East family wing, Callan said. His chief of staff, Daniel Brooks, stopped typing. The family wing is restricted. Not anymore. Evie heard the order from the doorway. She had changed into borrowed jeans and a gray sweatshirt, but her shoes still squeaked from the fountain water. No. Daniel looked at her as if she had just declined gravity. Callan turned. No. I have an apartment in staff housing. I have a job. I am not moving into a royal wing because your pups decided I make a comfortable pillow. Their condition improves when you are near. That does not make me equipment. The words came out sharper than she intended, but she did not take them back. Callan dismissed Daniel with a glance. When the door closed, the office felt too quiet. Rain tapped against the windows. This is not a punishment, he said. You keep saying that like it should make me feel better. You would have private rooms, security, and full access to the children. For how long? He paused. Until we understand what is happening. That is not a time frame. Callan's jaw tightened. He was used to commands becoming facts before the sentence ended. Evie folded her arms. I want everything in writing. My schedule. My pay. My right to leave. My right to say no if someone wants to test my scent, my blood, or whatever else Serena was planning. Serena no longer has authority over your care. That is not the same as saying nobody else does. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger. Recognition. You have dealt with this before. Evie looked toward the trees beyond the glass. When you are an unranked Omega, people call control protection all the time. Callan went still. For a moment, the Alpha King disappeared, and she saw the tired guardian who had admitted his niece and nephew had not slept in 9 months. Then we will make the terms clear, he said. He pulled a tablet from the desk and began typing himself. Evie watched him at a 30-day limit, independent legal review, normal wages plus hazard compensation, and unrestricted access to leave the property. Hazard compensation? She asked. You fell into a royal fountain, argued with the bondkeeper, and told the Alpha King no before breakfast. Fair point. The corner of his mouth almost lifted. He handed her the tablet. Evie read every line twice. One more condition. Name it. The pups are not forced to see me. They choose. Callan studied her carefully. Agreed. He signed first. No royal seal. No threat. Just his name. Callan Whitmore. Then he slid the tablet across the desk. You can leave whenever you decide. Evie looked up. His voice was steady, but something restless moved behind his gray eyes. She signed anyway. An hour later, she entered a small suite beside the children's rooms. It was colder than staff housing and nearly empty, except for 2 cardboard boxes already waiting by the couch. Rowan had filled one with books and mismatched socks. Maisie's box held a yellow blanket, 3 crayons, and a note written in uneven letters. Please stay tonight. Evie pressed the note to her chest. Behind her, Callan stood in the doorway, watching the room become warmer simply because she was in it. 30 days, she reminded him. 30 days, he agreed. But deep inside him, his wolf answered with a single fierce word. Mine. Callan shut the thought down immediately. Evie had asked for a choice. He would not become another man who mistook destiny for permission. By the end of the first week, Evie's borrowed suite no longer looked borrowed. Rowan had dragged in a stack of adventure books. Maisie had taped crayon drawings to the refrigerator, and someone had left a chipped blue mug beside the coffee maker because Evie once mentioned that perfect things made her nervous. The room had become the warmest place in Silver Pine, which was probably why Callan kept appearing in the doorway after dark. He always had a reason. A report for the healers. A question about Rowan's sleep. A reminder about council security. None of those reasons explained why he stayed after the answer. That evening, Evie sat cross-legged on the rug while Rowan worked through a puzzle and Maisie lined up toy wolves by color. You know, Evie said, most wolves do not organize themselves by rainbow. Maisie shrugged. Mine do. Then yours are smarter than most councils. Rowan laughed, but the sound stopped when a low mechanical hum moved through the wall. His shoulders locked. The puzzle piece slipped from his hand. Evie saw the change immediately. His breathing shortened. His eyes flashed gold. Rowan, she said softly. Look at me. The hum came again, too low for a human ear, but sharp enough to make the pups flinch. Rowan backed toward the window. Maisie covered both ears. Evie stood and followed the sound to a vent near the baseboard. What is that? Callan asked from the doorway. He had arrived without his jacket, his tie loosened after another council meeting. Turn off the ventilation, Evie said. Now. Callan did not question her. He pulled out his phone and gave the order. The hum died within seconds. Rowan sagged against the couch. Evie knelt beside him. This happens during his medical checks, does it not? Maisie nodded before Rowan could answer. Callan's face went still. The healers said the episodes were unpredictable. They are not, Evie said. Something is triggering them. Daniel arrived with a maintenance supervisor 10 minutes later. They removed the vent cover and found a small black device wired behind it. It was no bigger than a deck of cards. The supervisor stared at it. This is not part of our system. Callan's voice turned cold. Who had access to this wing? Medical staff. Security. The bondkeeper's office. Nobody said Serena's name, but everyone thought it. Rowan reached for Evie's hand. His fingers were small and cold. Was I bad? He asked. The question broke something in Callan's expression. Evie squeezed Rowan's hand. No. Someone made you feel afraid, and then blamed you for being afraid. Callan looked away toward the rain-dark windows. Royal power had protected him from many things, but not from missing what had been happening inside his own home. I should have known, he said. You should know now, Evie replied. That is what matters next. His eyes returned to hers. For a second, the room narrowed to the space between them. Cedar and rain filled the air, and the mark on Evie's wrist warmed beneath her sleeve. Callan felt the scar over his hard answer. He stepped closer before catching himself. Maisie yawned against Evie's shoulder, breaking the moment. Later, after the pups had fallen asleep on the couch, Callan found Evie curled in the armchair with her head tilted to one side. A half-finished cup of cocoa sat on the table. He picked up the yellow blanket and laid it over her carefully. Evie opened her eyes. They were only inches apart. Neither of them moved. Then her scent changed, soft and bright, like apples after rain. Callan's wolf surged forward with recognition, so strong it stole his breath. Evie's glowing mark appeared beneath the blanket. Callan straightened too quickly. What is it? She whispered. He looked at the sleeping pups, then back at her. Something I am not allowed to want. Evie stared at Callan. Not allowed by whom? He stepped back from the chair, putting distance between them so quickly that the warmth vanished with him. The council? That sounds convenient. It is not. His voice stayed calm, but his hands had tightened at his sides. Evie pulled the yellow blanket around herself and glanced at the sleeping pups. You keep saying things like that, then expecting me to understand the part you are leaving out. Callan looked toward the dark windows. Beyond the glass, rain moved across the grounds in silver lines. An alpha king does not choose only for himself. Every bond affects 7 packs, trade routes, border agreements, and succession. Evie let out a quiet breath. So this is political. Everything around the throne is political. Even me. He did not answer. That hurt more than she expected. By morning, Callan had returned to the version of himself Silverpine knew best. Controlled. Formal. Impossible to read. At breakfast, he stood at the end of the table reviewing council messages while Rowan argued with a bowl of oatmeal and Maisie drew a crown on her napkin. Evie waited for Callan to mention the night before. He never did. The Western Alpha delegation arrives at noon, he said. You and the children will remain in the family wing. Evie set down her coffee. Am I being hidden? You are being protected. There is that word again. His gray eyes met hers, then moved away. The mark beneath her sleeve had been warm since dawn, pulsing whenever he came near. She did not know what it meant, but she knew he did. That afternoon, the royal reception filled Silverpine's main hall with dark suits, polished shoes, and the quiet competition of powerful wolves pretending to be civilized. Evie had been asked to deliver updated medical notes to Daniel, nothing more. She entered through the staff side of the room and immediately felt the hierarchy settle over her. Alphas gathered near the raised platform. Betas controlled the doors. Omegas without rank moved along the walls carrying trays. Callan stood beneath the Silverpine crest beside a visiting Alpha's daughter named Claire Ashford, whose family controlled 2 northern territories. Claire was elegant, confident, and clearly expected to be seen beside him. Evie told herself that the tightness in her chest was embarrassment, not jealousy. Then Callan caught her scent. His head turned before she reached Daniel. Across the crowded hall, his eyes found hers with frightening precision. The scar beneath his shirt burned. Evie's wrist answered. For one suspended second, neither of them heard the room. Then Claire touched Callan's arm, and he forced himself to look away. Evie handed Daniel the notes. Is there anything else? She asked. No, but Evie, good. She left before he could finish. Callan followed 10 minutes later and found her in the quiet corridor outside the children's library. You should not have been in that room, he said. Evie laughed once, without humor. Because I embarrassed you? Because every alpha there could smell that something changed. Her anger faltered. What changed? Callan looked at her wrist. The bond is trying to surface. The hallway seemed to narrow. What bond? He closed his eyes briefly, as if the truth carried a cost. The mate bond. Evie went still. You knew? Since last night. And you decided not to tell me. I needed time. No. You needed control. The words struck cleanly. Callan did not defend himself. Evie stepped back. You made me fight for the right to choose whether I stayed in a room, then hid the one choice that could change my entire life. I was trying to protect the alliance. Then protect it. Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. Just do not pretend you were protecting me. She walked away. Behind her, Callan stood alone in the corridor while his wolf pressed against his ribs, furious at the distance. At the far end of Silverpine, Serena opened a sealed blood report. The result glowed across her screen. Heartwarden bloodline confirmed. She read it twice, then deleted the file. Evie avoided Callan for the rest of the day. It was not difficult. Silverpine was large enough to hide an army, and the family wing had plenty of quiet corners where an Omega could pretend her life had not changed overnight. She spent the afternoon with Rowan and Maisie, helped June with a reading lesson, and ignored the warmth in her wrist every time Callan crossed another floor of the building. By evening, the mark had started pulling her toward the courtyard. Evie tried to dismiss it as stress. Then Maisie appeared beside her holding a small silver bracelet. You lost this, the girl said. Evie recognized it immediately. It had belonged to her mother. Where did you find it? Near the fountain. Evie looked toward the windows. Rain had stopped, leaving the stone courtyard shining beneath the lights. You should be in bed. Maisie took her hand. So should you. 10 minutes later, they slipped outside in coats and sneakers. The fountain stood silent at the center of the courtyard, its water dark and still. Evie climbed over the low stone edge and searched near the place where she had fallen. It must have caught on something, she said. Maisie pointed toward the base. There. A faint blue line glowed beneath Evie's hand. The moment her fingers touched it, the stone shifted with a low click. A narrow panel opened beneath the fountain, revealing a metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Evie lifted it out carefully. Inside were old photographs, handwritten records, and a silver seal marked with the same symbol that appeared on her wrist. Her breath caught when she saw the name on the first page. Mercer. Not once. Dozens of times. Evelyn Mercer. Ruth Mercer. Thomas Mercer. Names stretching back more than a century. What is it? Maisie whispered. Evie read the heading aloud. Heartwarden Registry. The records described a line of Omegas trusted to calm young wolves, protect developing mate bonds, and detect outside interference. They had served the Silver Pine Crown until a king accused them of influencing succession. After that, every record of their service had been sealed, and the families had been scattered among smaller packs. Evie's hands began to shake. Her parents had never told her. Maybe they had not known. Maybe someone had made sure they could not know. Evie, Callan's voice came from behind her. She turned. He stood at the edge of the fountain with 2 guards several yards back. His gaze dropped to the open box. Where did you get that? Under your royal monument. He stepped into the water without caring about his shoes. Let me see. Evie pulled the papers closer. Did you know? Know what? That my family served yours. That we were erased. Callan's face changed. No, you knew about the bond. That was different. Was it? Her voice rose before she could stop it. You brought me into this wing. You kept me close to the pups. You watched my mark light up and never once mentioned that your family might have buried mine. I did not know these records existed. He sounded honest. That almost made it worse, because Evie wanted to believe him. Then why was Serena afraid of my name? Callan said nothing. The pause was small, barely a second. But after everything he had hidden, silence felt like another betrayal. Evie closed the box. You should go inside, Maisie. The girl hesitated, then obeyed. Callan stayed in the water across from Evie, the blue light moving between them. I am telling you the truth, he said. Maybe. Evie held his gaze. But I do not know when your truth starts anymore. Behind them, the fountain suddenly roared to life. Water rose in a circle around Evie, and the silver seal in her hand opened by itself. Inside was a single photograph of Callan's mother standing beside a young woman who looked exactly like Evie. Evie held the photograph under the courtyard lights. Callan's mother stood beside a young woman with the same green eyes, the same soft jawline, and the same silver bracelet Evie had worn since childhood. On the back, someone had written 2 names in faded ink. Queen Helena Whitmore and Ruth Mercer, sworn sisters of the Silver Pine Crown. Ruth was my mother, Evie said. Callan took the photograph carefully. My mother never mentioned her. That seems to be a family tradition. The words were quiet, but they landed hard. Before Callan could answer, Daniel hurried into the courtyard holding his phone. Your Majesty, we have a problem. A video from Founding Night had spread across the private networks of all 7 packs. It showed Evie falling into the fountain, the pups rushing toward her, and the blue mark appearing on her wrist. The final seconds had been edited to make it look as though she reached for Rowan before he lost control. The caption beneath it read, Unranked Omega uses forbidden scent work on royal heirs. By midnight, the name Fountain, which was everywhere. Evie read the comments until Callan took the phone from her hand. Do not. Why? They are talking about me. They are trying to turn fear into evidence. And your council will let them. Callan did not deny it. The emergency meeting began less than an hour later. Evie was ordered to remain outside the chamber while Alpha representatives argued about her future on the other side of a closed door. She could hear every word through the carved wood. She has compromised the heirs. She should be removed from Silver Pine. The king's judgment is already effected. Then Serena's voice rose above the others. Until we understand her abilities, Evelyn Mercer must be isolated from the royal family. Evie stood alone in the hallway while guards avoided looking at her. A week earlier, they had barely known her name. Now every person in Silver Pine seemed to have decided what she was. The doors opened. Callan stepped out first, his expression controlled. Serena followed with several council members. Miss Mercer, Serena said, you will return to staff housing while the investigation continues. Will I be allowed to speak? Evie asked. The council has heard the relevant evidence. You heard a video somebody edited. The decision is temporary. Evie looked at Callan. Is that your decision too? His jaw tightened. I am working to prevent a larger conflict. That was not my question. For one painful moment, he said nothing. Rowan came running down the hall before anyone could answer. He moved straight past the guards and grabbed Evie's hand. She did not hurt us. Serena's voice softened in a way that felt practiced. Rowan, you do not understand what she may have done. I understand being scared. He stood closer to Evie. She is the only person who did not make me feel bad for it. Maisie appeared behind him carrying the yellow blanket. She wrapped it around Evie's shoulders in front of the entire council. One by one, The watching staff lowered their eyes. Not in shame this time. In respect. Serena saw it too. Her expression sharpened. Take the children back to their rooms. Rowan's grip tightened. No, Callan finally stepped forward. They stay. Serena turned to him. Then you are choosing her over the stability of 7 packs. I am choosing not to punish someone without proof. It was not the declaration Evie wanted, but it was the first time he had challenged the council in public. Serena smiled without warmth. Proof can be arranged. That night, Evie packed a small bag for staff housing. Rowan refused to leave her doorway. Maisie sat on the bed, silent and pale. Then the alarm sounded. A guard rushed into the room. Rowan Whitmore is missing. Evie looked down. The boy was no longer beside her. On his empty pillow lay a torn piece of fabric carrying her scent. The torn fabric smelled like Evie, but she had never seen it before. That was planted, she said. Serena stood in the doorway with 2 royal guards behind her. Until Rowan is found, you will remain under supervision. He could be outside in the rain, and you want to waste time guarding me? You were the last person seen with him. Callan entered before Serena could say more. His eyes moved from the fabric to Evie, then to the open window beside Rowan's bed. Wind pushed rain across the floor. Where is Maisie? He asked. With Daniel, a guard answered. Bring her here. Serena stepped closer. Your Majesty, the council requires Miss Mercer to be detained. Callan took the fabric from her hand and raised it to his nose. His expression hardened. This carries Evie's scent, but not her touch. Serena went still. You cannot know that. I know her scent. The room fell silent. Evie felt the mate mark warm beneath her sleeve, but this time Callan did not hide what the bond told him. Maisie arrived wrapped in her yellow blanket. She looked at Rowan's empty bed, then at Callan. He heard the sound again, she whispered. What sound? Evie asked. The one in the walls. He said it was calling him into the forest. Callan turned toward the guards. Seal the property. Search every trail within 10 miles. No, Evie said. Too many wolves will scare him farther away. Serena's gaze sharpened. You are not joining the search. Callan looked directly at Evie. Yes, she is. The council will consider that an abuse of royal authority. They can discuss it after my nephew is safe. 20 minutes later, Callan and Evie entered the Olympic forest with flashlights, rain jackets, and a small tracking team several yards behind them. The storm swallowed every sound except water striking the trees. Evie followed the pull in her wrist. It was faint, but it felt different from the bond leading her toward Callan. This pull was smaller. Frightened. This way, she said. Callan trusted her without asking why. They found one of Rowan's shoes beside a creek and claw marks in the wet soil where he had shifted. He thinks this is his fault, Evie said. The episodes. The rumors. Everything. Callan stared into the darkness ahead. I should have seen what was happening to him. You were trying to hold 7 packs together. That is not an excuse. No. It is a reason. There is a difference. They continued uphill until lightning flashed between the pines. Callan reached for Evie when she slipped on the mud, then released her the moment she found her balance. About the bond, he said. This is not the time. There may never be a good time. She kept walking. Then say what you need to say. I was wrong to hide it. Evie stopped. Rain ran from the edge of her hood. You were afraid I would become another political problem. I was afraid choosing you would destroy the alliance. And what were you afraid would happen if you told me? Callan's answer came quietly. That you would choose to leave. Evie looked at him for a long moment. The bond does not give you the right to make my choice easier for yourself. I know. Do you? I am learning. A weak howl rose through the storm. They ran toward it and found Rowan curled beneath the roots of a fallen cedar, trembling beside another black device. Evie dropped to her knees. Rowan, it is me. The pup crawled into her arms. Callan removed the device from the mud. A silver seal was stamped on its back, the crest of the royal bondkeeper. Rowan shifted back, exhausted but safe. She said you would come, he whispered. Callan's face went cold. Who said that? Rowan looked toward the trees. Serena. By the time Callan carried Rowan back through Silverpine's main doors, the storm had soaked everyone through, and the entire royal household was awake. Evie stayed beside the boy while Daniel called the healer, but Rowan would not let go of her hand. Do not leave, he whispered. I am right here, she said. Callan placed the black device on the long table in the council chamber. Water dripped from his coat onto the polished floor. Serena was already waiting, dressed as though she had never left her office. "You found him," she said. "You knew where he was," Callan replied. Serena did not flinch. "That is a serious accusation." "He said your name. He is a frightened child." Evie stepped forward. "He is also telling the truth." Serena looked at her with open contempt. "You have made yourself very important in a short amount of time." "No. You made sure everyone noticed me." Callan turned the device over, revealing the silver crest. "This came from your office." Serena folded her hands. "The bondkeeper controls hundreds of medical instruments. A seal proves ownership, not intent." Daniel entered with a tablet. The serial number was assigned to a developmental response study 9 months ago. Callan's eyes hardened. "The month my sister died." Serena's calm expression finally cracked. "That loss created instability. The children became unpredictable, and you became distracted. I had to determine whether they were fit for succession." Rowan pulled closer to Evie. Callan's voice dropped. "You frightened them on purpose. I tested them. You made a child believe he was dangerous. I protected the crown." Serena moved toward the wall of illuminated bond records. "You think leadership is kindness and bedtime stories now, but 7-packs do not survive on tenderness. They survive because someone is willing to control what others cannot." Evie felt the mark on her wrist burn. "That is not protection. That is fear wearing a uniform." Serena's gaze snapped toward her. "Your family said the same thing." The room went silent. Callan stepped closer. "You knew about the Mercers." Serena gave a tired smile. "Of course I knew. Heart wardens were removed from royal service because they could influence bonds, calm heirs, and make powerful alphas question their duty. Your mother believed they deserved restoration. She was wrong." Evie thought of the photograph beneath the fountain. "My mother knew Queen Helena. Ruth Mercer helped her hide records from the council. When the truth was discovered, both women paid the price." Callan went still. "What truth?" Serena looked at him. "That your scar was never dead. It was sealed." Callan's hand moved to his chest. Evie felt the bond answer with a sharp pulse. "Why?" he asked. "Because a king with a true mate can be influenced. A king without one serves the alliance." Evie stared at Serena. "You erased my blood test." "I erased a threat." Serena tapped the control panel beside the records. Every screen in the chamber flashed white. Across Silverpine, bonded wolves cried out as a painful wave passed through the network. Callan staggered but remained standing. Rowan covered his ears. Maisie ran into the room with Daniel and rushed to Evie. "Stop it," Callan ordered. Serena's voice stayed cold. "Step away from the Omega, surrender the Heart Warden records, and I will release the system." Evie looked around at the glowing bonds, the frightened children, and the king fighting to remain upright. Then she realized something Serena had not. The pain was everywhere except inside her. The mark on her wrist was not submitting to the system. It was pushing back. Evie pressed her glowing wrist against the control panel, and the white light flickered. Serena's confidence vanished for the first time. "Do not touch that." Evie held her hand in place. "You said Heart Wardens could influence bonds. You never said we could free them." A warm pulse moved through the chamber. One by one, the bond records stopped flashing. The cries from the hallway faded, but Callan remained bent over the council table, one hand against the scar on his chest. His unfinished bond with Evie had taken the worst of the attack. Serena reached for the controls again, but Daniel stepped between them. "The council has been notified." "The council answers to the crown," Serena said. "Not while the king is compromised." The chamber doors opened. 3 senior alphas entered with royal guards behind them. Alpha Grant Ashford carried the emergency charter in his hand. "Callan Whitmore is temporarily suspended from command until his condition can be evaluated." Rowan stared at them. "He found me." "This is not about you," Grant said. Evie felt Rowan shrink beside her. "That is the problem," she replied. "None of this has ever been about what the children needed." Grant ignored her. "Evelyn Mercer will leave Silverpine before sunrise. In return, the bondkeeper will deactivate every remaining control placed on the heirs." Callan forced himself upright. No, his voice was weak, but the room still went quiet. Serena looked almost pleased. "Refuse, and the pups continue to suffer." Maisie gripped Evie's coat. Rowan stood on her other side, trying not to shake. Evie understood the trap. Serena wanted Callan to choose publicly between the children and his mate. Either answer would destroy him. "I will go," Evie said. Callan turned toward her. "You are not bargaining with your freedom. I am choosing what happens to it." She will not keep her word. Then make sure the council hears what she just promised. Grant raised the charter. The agreement will be recorded. Callan crossed the space between them, each step costing him. Evie, do not do this because you think you owe us. I am not doing it for the crown. She looked at Rowan and Maisie. I am doing it because they deserve one night without being afraid. His wolf pressed against the bond, demanding that he stop her. Callan could have ordered the doors sealed. He could have invoked royal protection. Instead, he looked at the woman who had asked him from the beginning not to confuse destiny with permission. Will you come back? He asked. Evie swallowed. I do not know. Pain moved across his face, open and human. Then I will not command you to stay. Serena watched, waiting for him to break. He did not. Callan stepped aside. Evie packed before dawn. The family wing felt cold again without the pups filling her room. Rowan refused to say goodbye. Maisie followed Evie to the entrance in her pajamas, carrying the silver bracelet from the fountain. You forgot this, she whispered. Evie knelt so they were eye level. Keep it safe for me. Maisie shook her head and closed Evie's fingers around it. Mom told us about heart wardens. Evie froze. Your mother? She said they do not run when people are scared. Maisie glanced toward the staircase, where Callan stood alone beneath the royal crest. She said they choose where to stand. Evie rose, pulled her suitcase through the doors, and crossed the courtyard as the first gray light touched the fountain. The moment she passed through Silverpine's gates, the bond between her and Callan stretched thin enough to hurt. Behind her, every control on the pups went silent. Serena had kept her promise. Then Evie's bracelet opened in her palm, revealing a hidden message in her mother's handwriting. The Heart Warden does not surrender the bond. She returns when the crown is ready to kneel. Evie turned around before the shuttle reached the highway. Her mother's message had not told her to abandon Silverpine. It had reminded her that leaving and surrendering were not the same thing. By the time she returned, the council chamber was full. Representatives from all 7 packs stood beneath the royal crest while Grant Ashford called for a vote to remove Callan from the throne. Callan stood beside the empty king's chair, pale but steady. Rowan and Maisie waited behind Daniel, holding hands. Serena remained near the bond controls as if nothing had changed. The doors opened, and every face turned toward Evie. She was ordered out, Grant said. Evie walked to the center of the chamber. I left under an agreement made through coercion. That agreement ended when I learned the council hid evidence about my bloodline. Serena's smile was thin. An unranked Omega cannot address this assembly. Evie opened the silver bracelet. The Heart Warden seal rose from its center, casting blue light across the floor. Under the original Silverpine Charter, a recognized Heart Warden may speak whenever the crown, an heir, or a mate bond has been placed under outside control. Daniel looked down at his tablet. She is correct. Serena's expression hardened. Those laws were repealed. No, Evie said. They were buried. She placed the records from the fountain on the council table. Just like my family. Grant glanced toward Callan. This changes nothing. The king concealed a mate bond and allowed personal feelings to compromise the alliance. Callan stepped away from the throne. I concealed the bond. That was my failure. Evie looked at him, surprised by the calm in his voice. But Serena controlled children, falsified medical records, erased bloodline evidence, and used bonded wolves as political leverage. That was not Evie's influence. That was ours. We built a system where fear looked like order. Serena moved toward the control panel. Rowan stepped forward before she could reach it. She made the sound, he said. His voice shook, but he did not stop. She told me Evie would come if I followed it. Maisie joined him. She made us think we were broken. The room went completely silent. Serena looked at the children as though their words were an inconvenience. You do not understand what leadership requires. Evie raised her wrist. Maybe leadership should stop requiring children to suffer quietly. The mark flared. Blue light moved through the floor and climbed the walls, touching every bond record in the chamber. Evie felt hundreds of connections at once, strained beneath Serena's controls. She did not command them. She opened them. One by one, the locked bonds released. Wolves throughout Silverpine breathed freely again. Serena stared at the darkened panel. What have you done? Given back what you took. Grant called for the guards, but no one moved. Callan removed the royal ring from his hand and placed it on the council table. I will not keep a throne that demands her silence. Evie turned toward him. Callan, You asked for a choice. This is mine. He stepped down from the raised platform and stood beside her, not in front of her. I choose a crown that can be questioned, a pack where omegas can speak, and a bond that means nothing unless both people accept it freely. Serena laughed bitterly. Then you are no king. Callan met her gaze. Let the packs decide. Grant called the vote. 3 alpha representatives rejected Callan and walked out with their delegations. The alliance cracked, but it did not collapse. The 4 remaining alphas looked toward Rowan, Maisie, and Evie. Then, one after another, they lowered themselves to one knee. Not before the throne. Before the people the throne had failed. Evie looked at Callan as the bond warmed between them, no longer hidden and no longer forced. He did not reach for her. What happens now, he asked. Evie glanced at the empty chair, the kneeling leaders, and the children standing tall beside her. Now, she said, we decide what kind of kingdom deserves to survive. By sunrise, the last of the winter clouds had broken apart above the valley, and warm light spilled across the stone courtyard where the pack had gathered in silence. She stood beside him, not behind him, and that small difference said more than any crown ever could. For years, people had spoken about her as if she were too quiet, too weak, too ordinary to matter. Now those same people waited for her answer. He could have commanded them to kneel. He could have named her queen and ended every argument with one cold sentence. Instead, he turned toward her and opened his hand. The choice is yours, he said. His wolf stirred beneath the calm in his voice, protective and proud, but he did not reach for her. He waited. She looked at the faces around them, at the elders who had doubted her, the servants who had secretly shown her kindness, and the children standing near the front because they no longer feared the great hall. Then she placed her hand in his. I choose this pack, she said, but I will not lead it through fear. A murmur moved through the courtyard. He closed his fingers gently around hers. Then neither will I. No one cheered at first. The moment was too honest for that. Then an older woman lowered her head, not in surrender, but in respect. One by one, the others followed. Months later, the fortress no longer felt like a place built to keep the world out. The locked west wing became a schoolroom. The empty kitchens stayed warm after dark. Travelers found food at the gates instead of suspicion. And every full moon, the pack gathered without rank or title to share stories around the fire. He was still dangerous when danger came. His voice could still silence a room. But at home, she often found him sitting on the cottage steps with a sleepy pup against his chest, pretending not to notice when she smiled. You are staring, he said one evening. I am remembering, she replied. What? She sat beside him and watched the sun sink beyond the pine trees. How lonely this place used to be. He was quiet for a long moment. And now, she leaned her shoulder against his. Now it sounds alive. Inside, someone laughed. A kettle began to whistle. Footsteps crossed the wooden floor, careless and safe. He looked down at their joined hands, then toward the open door glowing with firelight. I spent half my life believing strength meant needing no one, he said. She smiled softly. Most people do. And the other half, learning that being chosen is not the same as being owned. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You could still leave. I know. She looked at him then, steady and certain. That is why staying means something. The bell above the door moved in the evening breeze, the same small sound that once warned of strangers. Now it called them home. And as they stepped inside together, neither of them looked back, because the life waiting ahead had not been built by fate, fear, or power. It had been built by 2 wounded hearts choosing, every day, to become a safe place for someone else.